Herzlich willkommen zum Bewohnerfrei-Podcast, deinem Lieblingspodcast, heute mit einem ganz besonderen Gast, nämlich mit einem meiner Lebenslehrer und Lebensmentoren, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Und ich freue mich, wenn ihr uns im Nachgang diese Folge bewertet. Und wir werden das jetzt auf Englisch weitermachen, was eine große Ausnahme ist. Und I will now switch into English. And Dr. Joe, it's a very big pleasure to have you on board in the Bewohnerfrei podcast. And I don't believe that some people will not know you because I talk about you a lot, but maybe there are some, so we'll do a proper introduction. Dr. Joe is a New York Times best-selling author of 4 books, including Becoming Supernatural, which Rita, my wife, is reading right at the moment, and How Common People Are Doing the Uncommon, which will be released in paperback on March 5th. Dr. Dispenza is a world-renowned teacher, lecturer, and researcher in the fields of neuroscience and epigenetics. His workshops utilize the latest scientific research to help people rewire their brains and recondition their bodies to a new mind in order to create a new personal reality. And that's exactly what happened to me. I went to a seminar in Berlin, and I just told you before we started recording, there's a time before and a time after meeting Dr. Joe. Thank you so much for taking time.
Tobias, I'm very happy to be on your show.
Thank you so much. I would like to share one thing with you that why that fundamentally changed my beliefs and my thoughts. To be honest, before I went to Berlin to work with you, I've never meditated in my life. I've just never done it. I thought it's something for people who have too much time, who don't have anything better to do. And then I come to your workshop and we do like the meditation warrior camp, you know, it's like everybody is all in. And for the first 2 days, my body was really fighting against it. And then I can just tell you what happened. A big part of my business I have and created right now, I saw it all in a meditation, which is for you, it's normal. For me, it was a miracle. So here's my question. For people who have not meditated yet, what happened to Toby's brain? Why did I...
Well, look, I mean, let's break it down here. Number one, I now know that when we do our events, there's 2 things that I want people to do. Well, there's more, but I want to give them numerous opportunities to overcome themselves. And I want to give them numerous opportunities to connect. Mm-hmm. And so when people come, Toby, to an event, the majority of those people, whether they're conscious of it or not, their brains and bodies are in the past.
Yes.
They live by certain familiar emotions, and certain thoughts that are connected to certain emotions condition their body to feel a certain way. Like you think about your I don't know, as an example, you think about your financial problems as an example, and people feel lack. Other people think about their ex and they feel resentment. Other people think about their new career and they feel fear. So they're combining a thought and a feeling. And when you have a thought in the form of a symbol, mm-hmm. and combined with a feeling, the conditioning process starts. So you keep thinking the same way, you keep making the same choices, you keep doing the same things, you keep creating the same experiences, you keep producing the same emotions. For the most part, your brain and body are in the past. Mm-hmm. So then the first couple days of an event are week-long events, and we've got thousands and thousands of brain scans, thousands and thousands of heart rate readings.
How do we know it? We measure it.
We measure everything. We have it all. And we now know that there is a formula. Mm-hmm. That if you follow the formula, then you are going to slowly overcome yourself. So how do we overcome ourselves? Well, you got to take your attention off your body, which is where most people's attention are. You got to take your attention off the people in your life. The stronger the emotion that you have associated with some person, good or bad, the more you pay attention to them. So you got to take your attention off those people. You got to take your attention off your cell phone, your computer, the things you own, the place you sit, the place where you live, the place you work. And you got to get beyond time, thinking about the future or the familiar past. And That's what we call getting beyond the self. So we give people numerous opportunities to get beyond their past, present reality and their personality that's connected to the past. And we work with having them find the sweet spot of that present moment. Now, once they hit that sweet spot of the present moment, Toby, that's, according to the quantum model, where all possibilities exist. So when you're not your body, you're not the people in your life, the things you own, the place you live, the place you work, or time itself, you take away all those things. The only thing you're left with is consciousness. You're an awareness. So you reached an elegant moment where you dissociated from your identity. And in 1 second, you were in a field of possibilities, and your brain downloaded a probable future, and the vision was so real, and it had a strong electrical signal that went along with it, and you could not pay attention to it. So the stronger you felt that signal, the more you were seeing that future, and all of a sudden, your brain and body move out of your past, present reality, and in that moment, you're living in the future, in the present moment, and you're rewiring your brain, and you're sending a new electrochemical signature to your body. And your body is believing it's living in that future. You're changing your gene expression. You're changing your protein expression. You're changing the way your brain thinks, the way it feels. And all of a sudden, you know what your future looks like. Now, we want everybody to have that experience, because you could be sick, you could be overweight, you could be vegetarian, you could be white, you could be black, you could be Asian, you could be rich, you could be poor. You could never have meditated before. In fact, our research shows people like you that never meditated before are
the virgins.
You're not trying to make anything happen. You're just curious to see what's going to happen, and that's the beauty behind that. So you had a moment where you downloaded information from the field and you saw future, and you now know that that's your future.
And that was incredible, because there were so many people when we had lunch. Some of them had that, others didn't. And I went there just with an open mind, and I was like, oh my God, that's like it's literally a new world. Why do you think that the normal school system, university system we are in, are not utilizing that for everybody? Because I mean, if a student or even a child could have that, our planet could literally look a little different.
Well, Toby, we need 2 bottles of wine in about an hour, 2 hours for that conversation. But look, this is relatively new technology. What we're doing is we're piercing a veneer. It's like the 4-minute mile. Mm-hmm. Once the 4-minute mile was broken by one person, then all of a sudden everybody started doing it. So we're breaking this consciousness, this level of consciousness that we need something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. And we're teaching people how to self-regulate without anything outside of them. So we are working, we do seminars for children. We do seminars for companies and organizations. We do seminars for athletes. And all of it is the same, but we're just teaching it with a little different slant to fit into child's development, to fit in with a sports athlete. But we're at a point now where the technology is reproducible. And that's what I care about the most, because anything that's reproducible, if you follow that formula, is science. And we now know that it's working. So now we got a lot of momentum, and people are breaking through. And I want to say something about certain people that didn't have the experience. They probably had it the next day, or the next day, or when they got home and they fell asleep on the couch. It always comes because we're always creating reality.
That's true. And I read the book, or some of your books, before I came, and there's one experiment. Maybe for you it's just one little thing. For me, it was mind blowing. With the chicken and the robot, there's an experiment where, but you can explain it better, but that a little bit shook my reality also of psychology, which I studied before, where I was like, how is that possible? That is something I've never heard before. Could you just tell a little bit to everybody how that works? Because there we could link, I think, where it's the biggest misconception also for most people, because they just believe something that, normal school teaches. Let me put it this way.
Sure. While technology is getting better, we're asking better questions, we can measure more. But there is a researcher named Rene Piaget. And Piaget was interested in seeing if the power of thoughts and feelings, or intentions and emotions, could have an effect on reality. So he took some baby chicks, and when baby chicks hatch, their first few days, they imprint to their mother. Mm-hmm. So he took a robot that was a random event generator, which means that the robot would turn 50% of the time to the left and 50% of the time to the right. But the order in which it does that is random. But it's like a coin toss. The majority of the time, it works out to be 50-50. Mm-hmm. So he dressed this random event generator up like a hen. And when the baby chicks were born, they began to imprint or bond with the random event generator. So then he took the robot and he put it in an arena, an open arena, and he just let the robot go. And as you would expect, the robot covered the entire area of the arena equally, on the left side and the right side. In the second experiment, he took the baby chicks and he put them in a cage on one side of the arena. And then he released the random event generator again. And 100% of the time, the random event generator moved in the direction of the baby chicks. And it's an official record. So the question is,
how?
If 3-day-old baby chicks can influence a random event generator to move towards the side that they're on, that their thoughts and intentions had that kind of effect with their tiny little brains, what could you and I do? So Einstein talked a lot about everything in reality being frequency, that you and I are constantly emitting vibration, frequency, and information, because all frequency carries information. So the baby chicks had a single-minded focus. They weren't thinking about their bladders. They weren't thinking about food. They weren't thinking about time. They weren't thinking about their bank account. They had one thing on their mind, and that was mommy. Mm-hmm. They had a very clear intention. By the same means, their feeling is love, because that's how they bond with, and there's an energy of love. So when you combine a thought and a feeling, you produce an electromagnetic field. Mm-hmm. So I always say thought is the electrical charge and feelings are the magnetic charge. And how we think and feel broadcasts an electromagnetic signature. So is it possible then that when they do that, they're able to influence three-dimensional reality? Now, why is that significant for you and I? Because if you apply that to a future that you're creating, then if you're creating from the field and not from matter, not as your body, not as your personality, not as things, but as an awareness in the field, then it's entirely possible then that you don't have to go anywhere to get what you need. Like go get your money, go get your new job, go get your new relationship, go get your health. That's matter to matter, and it takes time to do that. But when we can create a coherent brain, and our research shows that our students can, and a coherent heart, and our students are very good at that, then you're emitting a very organized, coherent field. And if you're creating from the field, and the field creates matter, then you will draw your reality to you. You don't have to go anywhere. You start having synchronicities, opportunities, synchronicities. And the moment you start seeing your reality unfolding equal to your energy, you're going to believe you're more of the creator of your reality and less of a victim of your reality. And you're going to do it again. Right. And you're going to do it again. And you're going to do it again. It's going to become a skill.
That's the manifestation, right? Where you manifest something and then you have it in the present moment and in your future. And you don't have to move. This is something what really blew my mind when I was sitting there, that it is already there. And I always do the meditation that you do with I call it earth healing meditation. I think it's called different, where you look down to planet Earth with all the mountains and the insects and being grateful and thankful for this. And having the understanding that to be nobody in no time on a planet that is not ours. And then I understood what you meant by it. you know, what that really means. Manifestation, before I came to your seminar, I thought like people think on a red apple and then there's the red apple, but that's not what it's meant by it, right?
Exactly. Well, look, I mean, most people, you know, look, in this three-dimensional reality that's made of matter, the world of materialism that we define with our senses, we experience separation. There's you there and there's me here. And there's space between us. And there's space between us. There's time between us. And so then that people have their sense of self, and then they have a sense of their vision, their dream. And where do we create our dream? Way out there.
Right.
So then we're separate from our dream. Our brain automatically creates a future. So we have to go get that future, right? So then people spend the majority of their lives living in lack, waiting for the event to happen to take away their emptiness or their lack. That's Newtonian physics. That's cause and effect. Waiting for something out there to make this feeling go away. And if you're living by the feeling of lack, you're creating more lack because that feeling is driving certain thoughts. So what we teach people to do is how to open this beautiful center called your heart. Because when you start elevating your emotional state, and you can really make this a practice, your body begins to emit a very coherent magnetic field that's up to 3 meters wide. And now that's an energy, and that energy is a frequency, and that frequency can carry information. It can carry the thought of your health. It can carry the thought of your wealth. Suffering can't carry the thought of your wealth. It just doesn't align with the frequency. Right. So then teaching people how to make that a habit and broadcast that signature while their eyes are open, while they're in a business meeting, while they're in traffic, while they're waiting at the bank, while they're brushing their teeth. It's just a natural energy that they wear. Then it starts becoming very common. Yeah. So that if you're feeling the emotion of gratitude that's connected to your future before it's happened, then you're not looking for it any longer because you feel like it's already happened. So now that then begins to create the magic. And I want people to be able to stay in that state.
For some people who are hearing that, they might be thinking, yeah, it all sounds interesting. I met twins at your seminar. They're over 80 years old, which I also interviewed for the podcast. And I asked them, you're over 80 years old. You went to Dr. Joe. They're traveling to your seminars. They went to this climbing, what's the name for it, where people climb? Yeah. And they're over 80. And then I asked them, what does your doctor say? And you know what they said? They said, we don't have a doctor. And I said, how long did you not go or see a doctor? And they said 20 years. And I said, what's your doctor? And they said, meditation. It just doesn't exist in our life. We don't need it. How do you explain that?
Well, look, I mean, I know those twins very well. I watch them.
Johanna and Adelheid, right?
I love their guts. I mean,
yeah, me too.
So we have people in their 80s where we do a challenge activity because we have been practicing for almost 10 years now, teaching our students how to sustain heart coherence and brain coherence, but they've been doing it in a room with 1,000 other people or 1,500 people, and there's music, and everybody's safe, and there's lights, and they close their eyes, and they can focus inward. But now that we know that they can do that, why not challenge them and put them in a situation that could evoke a survival or stress emotion, or activate a program where they go unconscious. And in that moment, when it counts the most, instead of them forgetting everything they've learned, going into an automatic program and not paying attention and feeling fear or whatever, to stop, instead of surrender to fear in that moment, learn how to surrender to love and begin to settle down the body, to begin to practice the formula now with your eyes open when your legs are shaking or you're feeling a little bit of loss of control, and be able to self-regulate then. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, whether you're 80 years old or you're 21 years old, when you walk out into your life and you face similar circumstances that produce emotions like that, you're not going to go unconscious and run a program. You're going to stop and say, let me practice with my eyes open everything I learned all along. And now, so you're able to self-regulate and fear becomes less of an issue. By the same means, if you're way up on a post and you just overcame that obstacle. When you return to your life,
at 82.
At 82, you're going to return back into your life and you're just going to say, this is nothing. This condition in my life is nothing compared to what I just did. And so we don't use age as an excuse in this work because too many people say, I'm too old to do this. Well, those ladies participate and they don't have the thought, I'm too old. Now, that means then that they're always growing and changing. And there's so much great research, Tobias, on the fact that when people are always stimulated and they're always learning, that their experiences then really keep them genetically youthful. So this work is not about keeping people from going to doctors.
No, of course not.
But if they're that healthy, then they have the right attitude and they understand it. So they're adding years to their lives. How do we know that? Because we've measured that too, that you can lengthen your life by just doing this work, because we have research to show that our students lengthen their telomeres, and telomeres determine your biological age.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps right now because there was one exercise which we will not go into detail because I want people to go and have the same feeling, where you literally touch the energy field of somebody else in the coherence of the heart and giving. And I'm literally getting goosebumps right now because I never felt that in my life. And we have a common friend, Isabel, who was literally sick before she came, and she stood up in the same workshop we were together, and she had a significant different feeling in her body. Her body reacted to all that. So it's probably the same explanation that if we carry a disease, it is also just energy. Do I understand it correctly?
Well, let's talk about it. First of all, Isabel is a passionate student because of that experience now, and she's having even more profound mystical moments. And that was the turning point for her. She had a tumor on her thyroid.
I forgot what it's in English. So it's
a little over 2 centimeters. And of course, the medical protocols get a biopsy and then do the radiation and do the chemo and get it excised and cut out. And when we did the coherence healing, there's a few things that we do to prepare people for that, because we do that healing at the end of a week long, when people know how to get beyond themselves, know how to connect to the field, know how to open their hearts. They put it all together. And so there's powerful research to show that, as an example, a researcher studied 10,000 cases of women with uterine cancer. And he studied the electromagnetic fields around their body, and he found out that 100% of the time, every single woman that had uterine cancer had the same exact pattern in the field. Okay, but then he found a certain percentage of those women that had the pattern in the field but had not developed uterine cancer. But every single one that had the pattern in the field that didn't have uterine cancer ultimately developed uterine cancer. So the researchers said it's not matter that's emitting the field. It's the field that's creating matter. So the matrix or the pattern of every disease is in the field. So if you change the field, you change matter. So we teach people then to heal, because we think we have to make the tumor go away. We actually don't. That's not our job. Our job is to change the pattern in the field. And once you take out, like it's like a slide projector. You have the source called, the light, and then you put a slide in, and then the picture appears on the wall. That's how reality is.
Right.
So all you do is you don't try to change the picture on the wall. You take the slide out and you put another pattern in, another picture in. And when people begin to understand what those patterns are, and they understand how to do that those patterns, that holograms are created by interference patterns. So then if you change the interference above the frequency of the speed of light, you're in the quantum. And in a matter of seconds, the closer the person is to source energy, the shorter amount of time it takes. And you saw a man with a stroke that was paralyzed for 2 years, who's a doctor of law, who didn't even
I saw a scientist who stood up, and I don't know if you probably remember, he said that he came because he didn't believe in all of that. And then he took the brain measurement, how do you call this hat that you put on? How's it called?
Mapping, yeah.
And he was, I think, a colleague at something. He studied physics or chemistry, and he said that's all not possible. And he stood up on the last day, and he said he has to go back to his university and go deeper into it because he has never seen measurements like this. Do you remember that? And I was like, wow.
Yes, I remember that, because our measurements right now, the amount of energy that we're recording in people's brains is so outside of normal. It's so outside of natural. It's supernatural. And so that person's having a very transcendental moment, and they're having a subjective experience, but we're capturing it objectively. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, because we see the same pattern. We see it in people over and over again. So, in fact, we can predict it. I can say, oh, Tobias is about ready to go. What do you mean? Well, he's about ready to have a very mystical experience. He's about ready to pop. And so now we can predict it, and we now know how to induce it.
But by the measurement, so you can read it pretty much when it happens, or do you feel it, or both?
No. We're reading it like when we were in Berlin.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, we had our brain scientists there. We had some very powerful measurements.
I saw it on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, wasn't one, it wasn't two, it wasn't three. We had a lot of them.
Yeah.
We were randomly picking people out of 1,200 people.
Yeah.
We were, 8 people, 10 people at a time, and we were seeing these incredible patterns. So we now know how to induce that state. We now know when it's going to happen. We could actually predict it in the brain, and people are getting better at having those experiences. So we're changing the way the brain measurements have been read up until this point. And I show my colleagues or scientists all the time.
How do they react? How do they react? Because it also takes a lot of guts to say, okay, you are right, Dr. Joe. I might have to reconsider what I've learned.
No, I never say that. What I say to them is I'll say, hey, Tobias, I want you to take a look at some of my research here. Help me make sense out of what you see here. And the first time they'll say, oh, the person's having a stroke. They're having a seizure. No, that's not a seizure. That's not a stroke. Okay, well, then they're on benzodiazepines. No, they're not on benzodiazepines. Wow. Let's see the energy. Then I show them the energy, and then they push themselves away from the table. They stare at me for a long time, and they say, show me another one. And then they ask, how do you do it? And then the conversation begins. And I'm not interested in forcing this down their throat. I'm interested in just having the conversation. So what's the side effect of that? Because we're evidence-based, because we have the objective measurements to show you can change your brain, you could change the way your heart works, you can change your neurotransmitters, you can change your hormones, you can change your gene expression, you can change your telomeres, you can change your immune system, all in a matter of 4 days. We have evidence of people that come to an event with a certain disease and leave the event that were blind, that are now seeing, that are deaf, that are now hearing. We have evidence now to prove that it's happening. So what's the side effect of that? Well, I was in Australia, and I was doing a one-day workshop in Melbourne, and I was signing books, and I had 3 people tell me their oncologists sent them to my workshop.
Wow.
We have more and more people that are coming because doctors are referring them, because intuitively this makes sense to them, but they're stuck in a model of the chronic disease doesn't change with chemistry, giving someone a pill. Chronic disease changes with a change in lifestyle, right. Changing the way you think, changing your choices, changing your behaviors, changing what you experience, and changing how you feel. And when you do that, you change your personality, and your personality creates your personal reality. So people who truly change, they'll say, my disease is in the other guy. I'm not that guy any longer. The other guy, I'm somebody else. And they don't have to visualize the tumor going away or the cancer going away. All they have to do is become somebody else. And all of a sudden, the body and their biology reorganizes to reflect who they're being.
What's interesting also to me is that it took you time to understand it. I saw a movie in a German movie theater where you played a role where you were paralyzed. You had an accident. Is that correct? You were paralyzed, and you like the traditional medicine just didn't do it. and then you started to look for something else. So it didn't come to you in your job prior to that. It came to you out of need. There must be something else, right?
I mean, look, when you're in an initiation, that was my initiation. And in order for some of us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And I didn't want to go through a very complex surgery where they were going to put long rods in my spine and stabilize my spine. I would be in pain my entire life and really handicapped.
Right.
So I had to weigh what I knew against what I didn't know. And I said, look, there's an intelligence that's giving me life, that's keeping my heart beating, digesting my food. And if it's an intelligence, it's consciousness. And if consciousness is awareness, then awareness is paying attention. So it's got to be paying attention to me. And paying attention is being present. So I got to get present with it and connect with it. It's not, I got to give it some new instructions. I have to influence it to program it to begin to work for me. So
in which emotion were you at this time? Need, love, hope?
No, I was angry. I was frustrated. I was fearful. I was told I was never going to walk again. I had all these survival emotions going on, and that's what I had to overcome. So the first 6-7 weeks of my inner process, I wasn't doing well at all. I was in a dark night of the soul because I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. I'd start creating what I wanted, and then the next thing you know, I'd be thinking about living in a wheelchair. And then all of a sudden, I'd be like, I'm focused on what I don't want to have happen instead of what I do want. Then I have to start all over again. And so
it does it automatically, right? Because you were wired like that for so many.
And when you're in stress and you're in survival, you always pick the worst case scenario in your mind and prepare yourself for the worst, because anything happens that's less than the worst, you have a better chance of surviving. So we plan for the worst, and people live their whole life this way. So it took me a lot of effort to finally work beyond that. And then all of a sudden I started getting less frustrated, less angry, less impatient, less fearful. And I started feeling generally better. I started to feel more love. And then all of a sudden my body started to respond. And once it started to respond, that was it. Then I knew I was onto something. And that's what kind of started me on this whole journey.
Wow. There's one word that also I haven't thought about before I came to your seminar, which is the pineal gland. And I know that most people who are listening to that podcast probably have not thought about that organ, because it's there, but it's inside. So most people don't even know it's there. In German, it's called Zirbeldrüse. And I bought several books after reading yours just to understand how that works. In your understanding on how important that organ is, could you just explain it to the audience here? Because it's so ancient. You showed us pictures from Egyptian wall paintings that it was kind of their god, and we haven't even heard about it before.
Sure. So think of the pineal gland as a radio receiver. Mm-hmm. And the pineal gland is a tiny gland that sits between the back of your throat and the back of your head. And the pineal gland's primary function in normal three-dimensional reality is it manufactures two neurotransmitters called serotonin and melatonin. It has some other functions, but let's talk about that. Right. Now, the moment you wake up in the morning and your eyes open up and the wavelength of visible light is perceived in your eye, that wavelength of light hits the optic nerve, and the optic nerve sends a signal to a nucleus, which then sends a signal to another part of the brain, and then all of a sudden, the pineal gland gets the signal to make a chemical called serotonin. Mm-hmm. Serotonin is the daytime neurotransmitter. Right. Our brain will go into what's called beta brainwave patterns, and now we're alert, we're aware, we are aware that we have a body, we're aware that there's an environment, and we're very aware of time. Now, the inhibition of light, or the loss of light, when it gets dark, all of a sudden there's no more wavelength of light. The pineal gland switches off, and it takes serotonin and it begins to make another chemical called melatonin. Melatonin is the nighttime neurotransmitter, and melatonin then begins to change our brain waves into alpha, theta, and ultimately delta, and the body now can go into restorative sleep. So serotonin gets us up, melatonin puts us to sleep, and it's a function of what's called the circadian rhythm. Mm-hmm. How the sun rises and sets, people get used to that rhythm, right?
Yes.
So, however, there's latent systems in the brain when the pineal gland becomes activated, it has tiny little crystals in it that are calcite crystals, calcium carbonate crystals, and they're kind of rhombohedrons. They're six-sided, eight-sided, and they're stacked on top of each other. And I found the research to show that the pineal gland has some very unusual properties. So when the pineal gland becomes activated, those tiny little crystals begin to shimmer, and they begin to become electrically activated. And once they become electrically activated, they become sensitive to frequencies. Not frequencies of light. Light has to go through the eyes, through the senses.
Yeah, the other frequencies. Yeah.
Once it's activated, it begins to pick up frequencies that are not perceived by the senses, and it transduces that frequency, because that frequency is carrying information, into very profound imagery. And now the person is having an inner vision. That's why it's called the third eye. And that inner vision is way more real than anything you've ever experienced in your three-dimensional reality. This is a very, very low frequency, but this is a very fast frequency. And all of a sudden, the pineal gland begins to make metabolites. Now, melatonin is already an antioxidant. But now, the derivatives of melatonin, when this gland is activated, produces very powerful antioxidants that heal: anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. You take the molecule, you tweak it again, you have a benzodiazepine. What is that? That's Valium. It's your body. Melatonin already relaxes you, but now, hang on. You are going to really chill out. You're going to be, survival centers in your body are going to be shut off, because that's what benzodiazepines do. They shut off your survival centers. So now you feel relaxed. It produces a chemical that puts the body into stasis. The first three centers, you lose sex drive, you lose appetite, you lose the preoccupation with your environment. The body is no longer, the mind, it's no longer driving us. Now you can dream without being interfered with your body. It produces a chemical that's the same chemical found in electric eels. Now the nervous system becomes amplified. Now it's electric. Your brain is going to switch on, and you're going to have a lot of energy in there. And it produces that same chemical called dimethyltryptamine, which is a very powerful hallucinogenic. And now your brain is going to literally perceive another world, and it's going to be more real than this world. And we activate that system because I want people to realize that they're not a linear being living a linear life, that we are dimensional beings living a dimensional life. And you only need one of those experiences, Tobias, and you can't go back to being the same person again, because you realize this probably is the illusion and more real.
100% agreed. It does take a lot of effort, though, to go there, because when you activate it by pumping up the liquid from your how do you call it, spinal cord? Spinal fluid. Yeah, and when we did it for the first time, I was like, oh, this is really different. That's a lot of work for your body to do it. But once you do it, what really blew my mind is that it is all in us already. That it's already there. It's just we usually don't utilize it.
Exactly. So there's a principle in biology, and it's an important principle. It's called endowment. And endowment means nature never wastes anything. So the principle in nature is if you don't use it, you lose it. Just get rid of it, right? So why do we have 98.5% of our DNA unused and it hasn't gone away? Why do we have this gland that hasn't been used by its full capacity? How come it's still there? We have all this. How come we have these big brains and we're not capitalizing off of that? Because those systems are waiting to be activated. It's our divine aspect of ourselves. So yes, it takes a great effort. Yes, it takes a great will. But just like anything else, once that system begins to switch on, everybody says the same thing. That was so worth the effort. Because
definitely. You always said, take a big zip on this one, right? When you're like, okay, I can't do more. And then there it is.
Yes. So I know that so when you start pumping that cerebral spinal fluid, there's little cilia on the end of pineal gland, little hairs. And when the fluid starts moving through the brain, through those caverns, it tickles the hairs.
Mm-hmm.
When we have people inhale and they hold their breath and they pump that fluid,
Mm-hmm.
they're pushing that fluid up against those crystals.
Mm.
And the crystals, this is research now, have a piezoelectric property. What does that mean? When you compress those crystals, the compression of those crystals, mechanical stress, turns into an electrical charge. Now, once they're electrically activated, they start to shimmer. Once they start to shimmer, they're now going to receive information. And now it's a radio dial. It's going to pick up information, and the brain's going to transduce it into imagery. And now that latent system switched on, and hang on, because people say, I want the unknown, but whoa, when it comes, it's big. It's
very, very big. How did the Egyptians knew it? I mean, is it were they further developed in that state? What do you think?
Oh, Toby, another bottle of wine or two and another whole evening. Look, I mean, do you believe that everything that we're learning about the Egyptians is everything?
No.
I mean, no. Our research shows that when that system switches on in the brain, the entire limbic system of the brain, the limbic brain, in our research is on fire. It is highly activated. What is the limbic system? It's the pineal, it's the pituitary, it's the thalamus, it's the hypothalamus, it's the corpus callosum. It's just little package right underneath there, the hippocampus, the amygdala, this whole kind of network. That Eye of Horus is a side section of that part of the brain. So our research shows that that limbic brain switches on. The Egyptians knew the thinking brain was the architect, the
Mm-hmm.
designer, and that this system was the creator.
Mm-hmm.
So design it with your thinking brain, but then surrender it and get out of the way and allow this system to hook up to energy and begin to turn it into to an experience. So I think the Egyptians, there's a lot of secrets in that culture that we haven't been told. Certainly the gods were real. Certainly the pharaohs had a connection to the gods, and certainly there were initiations that were about activating another world, entering another world, and I think that's the power behind the culture.
Do you believe that there is a certain awakening in our society towards the topics we are talking about? Is that something that comes from the field? Does it need ambassadors, like telling everybody you got to do that? Because I would assume that 95% who will be listening to that are going to be like, yeah, all right, until they have done it like I did. Now I'm 100% convinced. But do you think there's a bigger plan?
I'll answer it on two levels. The first level is really just 3D reality. Look, I mean, we live in an age of information. Information is so readily available, and in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. Mm-hmm. You don't need a doctor, you don't need a priest, you don't need a rabbi, you don't need a minister, you don't need a teacher, you don't need an authority, a governor to gain information. You can access information at your fingertips. Mm-hmm. And why is that important? Because information creates a greater level of awareness. Awareness is consciousness. You can't have consciousness without energy. So the more aware you become of knowledge and information, you're going to begin to see things that always existed, but you didn't have the understanding to see it. So what's the significance of that? Well, a change in energy, a greater level of consciousness is going to cause everything that's not consistent with that energy to begin to unravel or unspiral. So you're seeing politics, you're seeing economics, you're seeing religion, you're seeing education, you're seeing journalism, you're seeing the environment, you're seeing medicine, everything unraveling because people know too much. So then people are no longer taking things from authorities as face value. They're more proactive in searching for information and finding answers to their problems. So now imagine me, 1999, 1998, I started this journey. And when I started teaching, there wasn't a big listening for this. I mean, people didn't get it. Now,
so you didn't have thousands of students at the beginning, huh?
Well, no, people just didn't hear it. So then fast forward to today, I stand in front of an audience and I don't even hold back. I know people are informed. I just walk out and I'm just going.
I know.
People are getting it. They're informed, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that. But then you have people that, as you witnessed, standing on the stage or standing up in an audience and telling you, I had this condition, I had rheumatoid arthritis, I had lupus, I had a Parkinson's disease, I've had 50 brain tumors in my brain, and they tell their story in front of an audience, stage 4 cancers. We see this all the time. They're standing out in front of an audience of 1,000 or 1,500 people, and they're telling the story, and it's not pretty, but it's their story. And I stand behind the person, and I look out in the audience, and there isn't a person that's not paying attention. Everybody's leaning in because this is truth. And they're looking at them, and they're thinking, he doesn't look any different than me. He doesn't look any better than me. He doesn't look young. He does not buffed. He's not dressed very well. I don't know if he's wealthy. He's just a person. And why is that important? Because that's giving you permission to do the same. So now evidence, evidence is speaking very loudly. So now there's footprints in consciousness in the field that someone can step into. And by the same means, there's evidence in our research, and people can look and see, oh my God, there's the guy that had 50 brain tumors who no longer has any brain tumors. I mean, he told the story in November in Brighton, and guess what? The whole entire audience was in tears, and he wasn't doing it to be famous. He was doing it to help other people. So that person who has cancer, who's struggling to change it, is going to think of that guy. And it's going to be a reason for them to wake up in the morning, because they told him he wouldn't live through the night 3 times. They said, you're going to die. You're not going to make it. And he had 50 brain tumors, and then he had 6 in his brainstem, and he had 7 in his lungs. He's got 0. The doctors call him a miracle. But that now is a huge footprint for someone to step into.
Definitely. What is your mission, knowing all that? What's driving you? Because I see that you do one seminar after the other. You're literally reaching 10,000s of people more through your books. Where do you think that is going?
I just want to set a new normal, a new natural, a new level. I think that we
become supernatural.
Well, I think that that's where we're going. I mean, think about the species of human beings, okay? We are a living organism, no different than a school of fish or a flock of birds. Human beings are a living organism. And a living organism that's going to sustain itself and begin to evolve is going to have to be able to teach one another, to learn from one another, to take care of one another, to heal one another, to create for one another, to give and serve one another. That's how an organism functions in holism. That's how something. Right. So competition, hostility, prejudice, fear, anger, pain, suffering, all of that has to go. And so my interest is to create a change in the species, maybe not be the entire species, but just like the lizard that finally decided to become the salamander. He had to go through some trial and error, lose a couple limbs in the process. But long evolutionary process, but look what the organism can do. So I believe that we are way more capable of doing so many more amazing things. And all I want to do is say, okay, someone says I healed myself. Well, I healed myself, then I should be able to heal another person. Okay, well, now I healed myself and I healed another person. I should be able to heal a person on the opposite side of the planet. All I need is a picture, and if I'm in the field, there's no separation. So our students are doing that. Our students are healing one another. That's what the living organism does. You saw it. And now students are saying, there was a great example, a woman that was in our event in Cancun in June. Her brother had a massive seizure and a stroke, and he was in a coma for 2 weeks. And she got the group together that was in the advanced week-long event in Cancun. She put a picture and sent it all to them on the internet, on the emails. They all went up, went into the field, connected with him. Within 1 hour, he got discharged from the hospital. He came out of his coma. Now,
unbelievable.
That's the next level. So then every single experience that we create, affords us the understanding of possibilities we could never, ever consider until we had that experience. So it's the unknown. I know that.
Was that new to you also? That was like a miracle moment for you? Or
No, it's not new, but it's now being done. So now I'm living in a time where I'm waking up in my dream. I never thought in my lifetime consciously that I would be seeing blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, tumors shrinking, Parkinson's disease going away in 1 week, people throwing their crutches down, stepping out of wheelchairs, people with strokes lifting their arms above their head and they've been paralyzed for 2 years. I mean, it's happening. Right. So then imagine a living organism that's tuned up, one mind, one heart. We should be able to reverse the events that are taking place in this world if we get really good without having to go anywhere, but not just focus on peace during our meditations and then be angry the rest of the day or hostile. No, to live the prayer. Why? Because we have to do it with our eyes open as well as our eyes closed. And we got to be able to live that prayer so that we give other people permission to model us and say, wow, that guy's different. He's not predictable. He's different. And people begin to latch on to that. So what's the significance of that? Well, you witnessed coherence healing. What? You think that when we get really good at this, that you're going to, when there's a child there that's sick, are you going to put your blindfolds on and sit down and close your eyes, or they need something immediately? You got to be able to do with your eyes open on command. Like, let's go. I know how to connect. I've practiced connecting for the last 2 years. I know when I'm connected and I know when I'm not. So just give me a second. Now let's go. Now that is mastery. So
I think the enemy of all of that is ego, right? I mean, you have to take your ego out of that. And you said it when you started going into it. Because saying, "Oh, now I'm in a wheelchair," it's not good. That's also ego. That's like this thing that tries to tell us every day what doesn't work. And the moment even when we did this walking meditation, that was interesting, like to watch myself. Because there was an article in a German newspaper that they call it the Walking Dead, and when I read it, I was like, okay, so let's see if I'm going to do it. And then the ego hits, and it's like, I'm really walking like through this park. What should people think? And the moment you take this away, where you go to the higher sense of it, it all makes so much sense. And here's the similarity to other people I interview. I interviewed Geshe Michael Roach. I don't know if you know that guy. He had to work in a kitchen in India for 8 years until his master said, now you're ready. Just for the ego to understand, okay, now you're ready. And that is a similarity of pretty much all successful people, however we define success, I interview here. And it's the same here. When you let your ego go, do it for others, do it in love. And you always say, let the signature of your life be love. Then it works.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great point, and I love the idea of people doing that because they're driven by a mission, they're driven by a purpose.
Right.
And for me, I work really hard every day in overcoming my ego and building it up the next day. You just got to face off with it again. So you start figuring it out, you start really figuring it out, and the ego really it gets overactivated when we live in survival, because now we're getting very selfish in survival. And so teaching people how to get beyond that, because if they say, hey, look, I'm a healer and I heal someone, they got to get beyond that.
Right. You can't walk. It's not because it's not that. Yeah.
That's an identity. You have to get beyond that as well. And you got to get so beyond that identity that can't be a thought. That's going to disconnect you. But you can't be that identity. So it's a very fine line, and I'm working with our students. I don't want students to say I'm a healer. I don't want them to say that, because then that becomes another thing they have to overcome. Now they put the pressure on themselves that they have to be able to heal. All I want them to do is practice the formula, and I want to keep evolving the formula and creating conditions for them to say, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. We should be able to do this. Yeah. And that's how we continue to evolve it. And so I have a vision of where that will be, and honestly, I feel like we're ahead of schedule after this year, because we've we've had an unbelievably powerful year this year.
How do you handle your human beingness? I don't know if that's a word. Like, because you're a human being. You have needs. You like to have a meal. You have to maybe a glass of wine, as you said. How do you handle that? Like the polarity of being that and Joe, not even Dr. Joe, because that's also identity then.
No, look, I mean, I'm a very passionate man. I love life. I don't hold back in my life when it comes to giving or loving or serving or learning or whatever it is. I'm the type of person that's going to explore it because I'm curious. And I've just gotten over the years, I don't really care what people think of me any longer. I really don't. I'm going to allow myself to be myself. And even my colleagues that are great scientists and authors always say, last year were saying, whoa, boy, you don't hold back at all. I said, why would I want to? Why? Because I really care what people think. If I care what people think, then I'm not authentic. So I learn, I study, and I do the work. And if you do the work every day and you're consistent with doing the work, you're going to see out of a different window. You're not going to frame reality through the lens of the victim who says that person or that experience or that condition is controlling my feelings and my thoughts. If you're telling me that, I'm going to tell you you're in the unconscious program that you're a victim.
Yeah.
When you start realizing the way you think and feel actually creates an outcome, then you believe you're more, and when the outcomes start happening, you're going to believe less that you're a victim of reality, more of a creator of reality. So, I mean, I'm challenged all the time. Of course, I think the greater you become, the greater your challenges become. I don't see those challenges from a level of victimization. I do my best to see them as opportunities. I always work on facing those conditions and challenges from a greater consciousness, a greater level of mind that created them. I apply the work. And I keep myself in check. And, I keep myself in check by my staff and my team. How we doing? How can we serve better? How can we serve more? What's my blind spots? Help me, just because I want to be at the point where that I can lay that down at any moment and just really, really be of service.
Wow. I felt very, very connected to you when you said on stage that, there was a moment where you were on a boat and you had a glass of wine with friends, that it's okay for you to be human, because my stereotype of that before was everybody is just it's all vegan, it's all no alcohol, it's all we're just sitting down and holding hands, which is not true. I found people who have normal lives, normal circumstances they're in, and that it's also okay for them to play in both fields, in both worlds.
Why not? I mean, you can ask our German brain scientists. They will tell you, wow, those people were out by the piano singing. It was 1:30 in the morning. They were drinking wine. They were dancing. They were having the time of their lives. And then 6 o'clock in the morning, they all went into brain coherence. And I said, well, that's the way it should be. Why? Because every mystical experience I have, Tobias, and the profound ones, like some layer, some veil is removed. And I realize that I have it all wrong, that life is not about contracting from life. It's about engaging in life. I mean, if you think food is bad, then it's bad. I mean, because this is the world we live in. So do I not take care of my body? No, I love my body. I take care of it. I work out. I eat well. I don't overeat. I mean, I do all the right things. But if you're at my house and I'm cooking for you, I'm going to open a great bottle of wine. We're going to turn on some music. You're going to get a knife, and we're going to have some fun. And you're going to remember this night for the rest of your life, because that's why we're here, to enjoy it.
Yeah, I wrote a book, it's called Unbox Your Life, which is pretty much don't pretend to be an adult. There's a lot of confetti everywhere. You just have, it's literally, and people, it is true. I mean, that's how it is. Tell us a little bit about your new book, because I think a lot of people in my community have read the books you already wrote. Now there is the new one. Where was it here? Common people are doing uncommon.
No, a little bit about that. No, what's happening is Becoming Supernatural. How Common People Are Doing the Uncommon is going to paperback in March. And so It's just a paperback release.
Okay. I thought it's a new book.
No, it's well, shh.
Yeah.
I have an idea for a new book, but
yeah, tell me a little bit about the idea of the new book.
No.
Just the idea.
No, well, I want to talk about, what I really want to talk about is the new normal. I want to create a vision for people based on the principles of the living organism that's a code of life, a way of being that people can begin to apply, that we start creating small cultures of people in communities of people, and we practice how the living organism functions to see what kind of effects that we can begin to create. Because we are in such an unusual age right now, because the age of selfish individuality has to end for the living organism to thrive. How can an organism compete with one another or murder one another and expect to thrive? So it makes sense, but there's no experiments for that. So I want to do experiments where you create communities and you have people begin to see what kind of effects, solving problems like whatever it is, plastic in the ocean, or another way to create. I saw this brilliant thing on a show the other night, and I never even watched TV. I don't know why I turned the TV on. It was on 60 Minutes, and I turned right to it, and I sat down, and there was an older man who would go to Walden Pond, where all the transcendentalists would go. He's not a scientist, and he figured out a way to create sugar that has no calories, that's made from corn, that doesn't rot your teeth. He's got gasoline that you could drink as alcohol or put in your car that emits no carbon emissions. He's got medications, all from this technology. And the university scientists are all on his board, and that came from his mind. So that's going to clear out, if it becomes 30% of people using that for emissions around the world, well, we're changing the destiny of mankind. I believe that information in the field can be accessed to resolve those problems. We just need to put our mind on that instead of the Bachelor or Housewives of whoever dancing with whatever. I mean, that's not an expression of our greatest potential. And I believe that the mind is the answer from this point forward.
Well, I'm going to be your ambassador in Germany. I'm already putting the drums go to Dr. Joe Dispenza. Are you coming back to Germany? Is there?
Yes, I'll be in Berlin next week, actually. We're doing an advanced follow-up. And this advanced follow-up in Berlin is about the mystical. It's 4 days of the transcendental experience. It's another level of the pineal gland teaching. I want people to go interdimensional. And so the event in Berlin in next week will be an advanced follow-up. I want to invite people to come, those people that have done my work. And there's a lot of rumors that it's all through the night. Well, you sleep and you have plenty of time to rest, and we feed you, and it's not.
I mean, that's something we have to warn a little bit. You guys going to get up very early if you go to Dr. Joe. But the event that I did, the 7 day long, are you doing it in?
Back in March in Bonn, Germany, beginning of March, and we'll do a week-long event. And I'm just saying this because it's the truth. It's going to sell out in a very short amount of time.
After that podcast, it will be full. I can promise you that. We put it in the show notes, definitely, in here. And my last question is, maybe that's a little difficult one at the end. After everything you have learned over the last years, do you believe that the common media will start reacting on that stuff, or are they too arrogant of doing that? Because you measured it, we see it, but it's not in the common media yet. There is still The Bachelor. There's still the Dancing on Ice.
Yeah.
You believe it?
Well, look, I mean, you want to control people, control their emotions. I mean, that's what it's all about. You can change the channel. You can go from anger with news to sports and competition to a soap opera and sadness and pain, and you can feel anything you want to feel, and then people are relying on that outside of them. But what's happening now and I just came from another podcast and run by a Hollywood person. They're interested in the truth, and many people are interested in the truth. And it's not a bunch of talking heads in a documentary talking about what's possible. It's really showing it that it's already happened. And I do believe that in this current era, that people are looking for that, and there will be more and more of that goes on, and people are going to latch onto it, and they're going to want to know more about it, and that's, I think this is the time right now where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how.
Wow, what a great final quote. It's not enough to know.
And they're empowered.
Wow. I will be definitely coming to the Next Level event next year because this year is already, Isabel probably told you, it's crazily growing what we are doing here. Due to your event, probably, I kind of opened something. Oh, there's one, maybe I asked it in the podcast. There were moments in your, when I did the meditation where there were kind of waves that I saw in my inner eye that where again my ego tried to hold me back, and it was really a physical fight to go to these next levels where you start seeing things like coming with your head over the water. You start seeing it, and then you get afraid of it. I did get afraid of the new reality a little bit. Now I got used to it, but that is a normal process.
Well, look, I mean, how have you and I been conditioned in our lives, and then count the thousands, hundreds of thousands of generations before us, that the unknown is usually considered
Scary.
Right. So then you step into the unknown. People yell, "I want the unknown," and then when the mystical starts to happen, they contract. But if there's a sensibility, I did it enough times, you just kind of go, I mean, I worked so hard for that, and then when it came, I contracted. Then you start thinking, the next time it happens, I'm going to relax into it. I'm going to go. So in the beginner's mind, in the beginning process, there's always resistance. The body is clinging to the past because it's afraid of the unknown. What could happen? I don't know what I'm going to do in the unknown. I don't know how I'm going to act. That's just what am I going to think? What's going to happen? So you start predicting. And the moment you start predicting, you're back into the Newtonian world, and you eliminate possibilities. So then when you start learning how to surrender, and there are degrees of surrender, you start letting go and trusting, and all of a sudden the doors of dimensions open to you. It's always blissful. It's always awakening. It's always transformative. It's always information. It always causes you to perceive a broader spectrum of reality, because the inner event is an experience. An experience enriches the circuitry in your brain. And we don't see things how they are. We see things how we are. So now, all of a sudden, you start to see more of reality. It was always there, but you didn't have the brain circuitry to perceive it. Now, what's the significance of that? Everybody doing that, you're not going to be seduced by television. Why? Because you're going to see the hidden meaning behind all of that, and you're going to be completely uncontrollable. Now you're free.
And I learned again that I don't know anything. Every time I go to a new seminar, I'm like, okay, there we go again. I didn't know shit.
Me too, because I always say to my kids, you need at least one of those a day, because that's what keeps us humble. Like, I don't know anything about that, so I need to look at that. And I love that.
Right. Thank you so much for taking the time. And it was a big honor having you here. There will be a lot of people listening to that. And the books we will also put in the show notes. And yeah, my big recommendation to all of you guys is don't go to the week-long event because it will be transforming. And then the unnormal will suddenly be normal. And then we talk again.
Excellent.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I will just finish it in German. Wenn euch die Folge gefallen hat, seid wieder so lieb und gebt uns eine Bewertung bei iTunes oder wo ihr das auch hört. Heute mit Dr. Joe Dispenza, einer meiner Mentoren, die wirklich fundamental etwas verändert haben. Danke euch für eure Zeit.